Hello, and welcome back to Playful Pedagogy. I'm Maureen, and this is video 6 in the Playful Thinking series, where we talk about Harvard Project Zero's visible thinking routines, what they are, why they work, and how to make them genuinely playful in your classroom. Today's routine is called Headlines, and it might be the simplest one in this whole series. One prompt, a few words, and somehow it reveals a lot of thinking. Let me tell you about a pile of papers. At the end of our solar system unit, I handed out a paper with the same prompt to every scientist. Earth is special because. When my scientists had finished filling in the blank, I collected all the papers, and later I sat down and read through them one by one. Earth is special because it has an atmosphere. Earth is special because it has life. Earth is special because it is the only livable planet we know about. Earth is special because it has humans. I stopped on the last one, read it again, and thought about it. Was it the most scientifically precise answer in the pile? No. Was it wrong? Also no. In fact, the more I sat with it, the more I thought, this scientist has done something interesting. Rather than list a physical feature of Earth, they have made a claim about what they thought mattered. And then there was the one, Earth is special because it's the only planet with water. This one is also interesting, but for a different reason. Because it's not actually accurate. We know frozen water exists on Mars, which is another planet. What makes Earth special isn't that it has water, but rather that it has stable liquid water on its surface. And combined this with everything else, it makes it just right for life. I only found out about this misconception because it was right there in the headline. This is what Headlines does. It makes the thinking visible, not just whether students understand the content or the concept, but how they understood it. What angle they chose to stand at when they looked at the same information as everybody else. A few words, a whole unit distilled into a student's perception of it. Headlines is a visible thinking routine from Harvard Project Zero's Visible Thinking Framework. The premise is simple. After engaging with a topic, a text, an experience, or an idea, learners are asked to capture the essence of that in a single headline. Rather than a summary or a list of facts, a headline is short, pointed, interesting, the kind of headline that would appear at the top of a newspaper article or a broadcast. It's written to grab a reader's attention and tell them what's important in as few words as possible. The original prompt is simply, if you were to write a headline for this topic or issue right now, what would it be? Project Zero describes thinking routines as sets of questions or brief sequences of steps designed to scaffold student thinking, deliberately simple so it doesn't get in the way of the student's thinking itself. Headlines might be the most minimalist routine in the whole collection, and that minimalism is exactly the point. This routine works wonderfully as a closing move, a 2-minute synthesis at the end of a lesson or unit. But I've also used it as an opening provocation, a formative check-in, and a discussion starter. It travels. Here is how I typically run it. Step 1, give a prompt. At a point where I want learners to consolidate their thinking, I give them a prompt. Sometimes it's open, write a headline for what we've just learned, or sometimes I give them a sentence starter to help them out. Step 2. I set a timer for a few minutes of quiet thinking time. This matters. Headlines feels quick, but the thinking it requires is not. Learners need time to sit with what they know, decide what matters most, and find the language to express it. Step 3. Collect or share. This can go one of two ways. If I'm using it as an exit task at the end of a lesson or unit, I collect them and read through them later, looking for strong understanding, clever distillations, or misconceptions I will need to address in the next class. Or, and this is where it can sometimes get really interesting, I ask learners to share their headlines aloud. Then I ask, what do you notice? Where do you agree? Where have you made completely different choices about what's most important to you? And why? That conversation, why did you choose that angle, can be even more interesting than the headline itself. I've also used headlines before teaching something. It's not just something for after. I might show learners an image, a shortened clip, or a provocative sentence, and then ask a headline before I teach the rest of the lesson. Then, after they've written that first headline, I will teach the lesson, and then at the end, I ask for a headline again. We can compare the two, and that becomes a visible record of learning, very similar to the routine I used to think, now I think. And the shift in thinking is the whole point. Headlines builds a specific skill, one of Bloom's taxonomy's processes, synthesis. Synthesis is different from summarizing. A summary tries to include everything. Synthesis asks, of everything I know, what is the essential thing I want to communicate, the one claim I want to make if I only had one sentence. That is a harder cognitive move and a more powerful one. When learners write a headline, they are making editorial decisions. They are choosing a frame. Is the story about discovery, about danger, about scale, about humans? Those choices reveal not only what they understood, but how they understood it, which is some of the most useful information a teacher can have. It also brings misconceptions to the surface in a way longer answers can sometimes hide. As I mentioned before, I had a scientist who thought Earth was the only planet with water. Their misconception was right there in the headlines, specific, confident, and something that I could gently correct in our next lesson. Perhaps most importantly, headlines values voice. Two students can have a complete understanding of the topic yet write completely different headlines because they've made different choices about what matters most to them. That is thinking, diversity of understanding, and that's worth discussing. The CI connection. For language learners, headlines offers something longer writing tasks often don't. A manageable, low-stakes entry point into academic language production. A short headline is less intimidating. It doesn't require sustained writing stamina. It allows a learner who knows and understands content but is still building vocabulary to express their understanding in an approachable way. This is more than a writing scaffold. It's a content language frame. Learners are practicing subordinating conjunctions, cause and effect structures, and evaluative language in genuinely purposeful contexts rather than fill in the blank with a grammar pattern. Instead, it's now tell me what you actually think using this structure. The language is in service to the meaning. And the affective filter stays low. A short headline feels like a game when learners share their thinking aloud and hear a classmate say, "Oh, I thought of it differently." It's the kind of low stakes, high curiosity exchange where language acquisition happens and discussion leads from there. Headlines travels across subjects well as any routine I know. For example, in science, the headline might read, "Humans change climate, now what?" Or after a photosynthesis unit, "Plants converting sunlight to life since forever." In history, the headlines learners might write after a major event they've learned about will tell you whether they understood causes, consequences, or human impact, and which of those they found most significant. Compare them across the class, and you have material for a genuine historical discussion. In literature, ambition without wisdom, a cautionary tale, or simply, he should have listened. Literature headlines often carry a moral weight that reveals how the readers have connected with the text. And in maths, area formula saves the day and the garden. It might sound silly, but it can be really fun, and it works beautifully because the act of naming what the math did, what problem it solved, it's a genuinely useful metacognitive tool. Anytime you've reached the end of something and you want to know whether learners understood it well enough to distill it, headlines is a great tool. And now for the playful twist. Headlines is already a visible thinking routine that I enjoy because some of my learners are super clever in what they write down, and I find their responses really interesting or funny. Here are some additional ways to make it even more playful and fun. Number 1, 6-word challenge. Give learners the prompt and a word limit. I often use 6 words because the constraint is productive. It forces genuine prioritization. 6 words feels just tight enough to be challenging without being impossible. When there's no limit, sometimes I get summaries dressed up as headlines. Add a limit and suddenly learners have to choose what is the single most important thing that I need to communicate. The act of choosing is in itself sophisticated thinking, and learners find it genuinely fun to crack that puzzle. For language learners, you might want to give them a few more words in their word limit. 2, headline bingo. Before learners write, give each learner a small bingo card with key vocabulary from the unit. Their headline scores 1 point for each word they use from the vocabulary card. They have to use it meaningfully, purposefully, intentionally for it to score, not just slip it in there so it's there. The constraints are generative. Learners are working with academic language because the game rewards it. 3, tabloid versus broadsheet. Give learners 2 headline tasks for the same topic. Earth, the only planet that matters. Scientists stunned versus study confirms Earth's unique condition supports complex life. One sensational, one serious. The comparison opens a discussion about bias, framing, and tone, how the same information can be packaged completely differently. Some learners find this one particularly eye-opening. 4, headline hot seat. A learner reads their headline aloud, and the class has 30 seconds to ask questions. What did you mean by special? Why only? The writer has to defend their word choices. It's a low-stakes debate with built-in content review, and it puts the learner in the role as expert, which they often love. 5, mystery headline. You, the teacher, write the headline. Learners have to figure out what the topic, event, or concept it refers to is without being told. This one works especially well as a hook or provocation at the start of a unit. A headline for something they're about to learn that they may not fully understand until the end. Then when you come back to it, the click of recognition is deeply satisfying. And you can kind of use it as an I used to think, now I think type visible thinking routine. Bonus idea, a headline wall. Post all the headlines. Give learners a sticky note or a colored pen, and they vote on which they think is the most interesting, surprising, or debatable, not the most accurate. Then discuss, why did certain headlines get more votes? This turns the routine into a whole class discussion about what good thinking looks like and how to communicate it well. Now, my challenge to you is to try it yourself. Find the end of something, a lesson, a chapter, a unit, a discussion, whatever your learners have just finished, and ask them to write a headline, one headline. Then read them. Notice which ones go straight for the facts and which ones reach for meaning. Notice where learners agree and where they've made different choices. Notice the headlines that surprise you or make you laugh. That surprise, that's the thinking made visible. That laugh, that's the playful part. If a student writes something that stops you mid-pile, something that makes you put the papers down and think for a moment, I would love to hear about it in the comments below. Those are the moments that this whole series is about. The blog post for this video is linked below. It has the playful twists written out, plus the other examples. And if you haven't seen the earlier videos in the Playful Thinking series, I'll link those below as well. Next up is the video for See, Wonder, Connect, another one I enjoy using in the classroom. I hope this has been helpful for you, and I hope you've had a day full of play. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you next time. Bye.